Hello, welcome back to Hooked by Kati, and today we're talking about gauge. I know when you're doing amigurumi, you don't want to think about gauge swatches, but really, even when you're working in 3 dimensions, it's nice to have a gauge swatch done so that you know how big your item is going to be. There's a good chance that if you don't do a gauge swatch, you're going to come up with a dragon who's this big instead of 18 inches, or a dragon who's ginormous when he wanted him to be small. Gauge is a way for you to make sure that what you're doing matches what the designer did. If you're working one of my patterns in worsted weight yarn with a G hook, odds are the gauge is going to be 8 stitches by 8 rounds equals 2 inches by 2 inches in SC. This means that if you're working in only single crochets, like a lot of my patterns do, you're going to, for every 2 inches, you're going to have 8 stitches across, and for every 2 stitches high or long, you're going to have 8 rows. Well, how do you check this when you're working in the round? Because if you're working back and forth, this number is going to be slightly different. When you're working in the round, the best way to check this is to take that number, that 8 stitches, and you're going to create a round piece that is 3 times as big a round as your gauge. In this case, I made a piece that starts in the middle and expands out till it is 24 stitches around. Then you're going to need to work even for at least the 8 stitches tall. In this case, I worked 10 stitches even so that we'd have enough to measure. What this allows us to do is gives us a tube that we can now press flat, and we will have enough stitches to actually count our gauge. So we can press our piece flat here and get out. I use a handy dandy gauge tool. You can also just use a measuring tape. But all you're going to do here is line this up so that it is at the very top of a row, not like halfway like this, but up at the very top of a row. And you're going to line up this edge so that it is on the side of a stitch. You know what? We're going to flip this baby over because the row needs to be the straight ones. So for this particular swatch, we need to have the row at the top. So we're going to scoot it over so that our rows, or our last stitch here, is a complete one. Don't want to cut it in half like that. Just got to give it a complete stitch. And then we're going to scooch this down so that it takes this whole row from the top down. So the last thing we want to do is chop off any pieces of rows or pieces of stitches. So as you can see, in 2 inches, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stitches. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rows. So this piece, since I made it in worsted weight yarn and a G hook, does in fact match my usual gauge. And that would be how you can take a gauge swatch for a 3-dimensional object. Thanks for watching a Hooked by Kati tutorial video. Please click subscribe and click that little bell so you get notifications every time I post a new video. And remember to go to hookedbykati.com for more patterns, tutorials, and guides to help you improve your art.